You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's up, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show. This is your UCLA Bruins segment. We are live on the Mighty 1090 ESPN Radio. If you're on podcast or video, thank you for tuning in. And big news out in Westwood, which we are so excited to get into. First, welcome in my co-host, the Madman Jamal Madni. What's up, brother? How we doing? How pumped are you? I mean, I'm teasing it. We won't even say it yet, but just tell me on a level of scale of 1 to 10, your excitement of this news that we're about to break.
I'm fired up, Ryan. And I think it's a ramp up. I'm at about an 8.5, 9. And it's one of these sort of exponential curves because I started at about a 1.5 because I didn't recognize who he was. I joked with our colleague, Will the Thrill Decker over text. And I said, either he's on a milk carton or he's a Where's Waldo champion or what, but I don't exactly know who this person is. But after I did the research, after I got a chance to digest, I am fired up with this and very proud of Chip for making this move, Ryan, and I'm sure we'll get into it. So the Bruins always do things a little bit differently, thinking outside of the box, and they did it yet again.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll get into all that. But first, show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus. If you put a wager on this higher, which probably wasn't an option because it was so non-knowing, but you would have won a lot of money because it was very unexpected, I should say. So, yeah, betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Tell the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So excited to be talking to you guys, though, because this is a big news for UCLA. And I do want to preface this. So far, as of Friday, we have not heard anything official from the university in this hire. So all reports indicate that this is happening, but nothing officially coming from the university yet, which is no surprise. They don't tell anybody anything, like literally nothing. You just all of a sudden on game day, you show up and you're like, oh, there's 5 guys out of the lineup and I guess they're not playing today. So I wouldn't be shocked if we never hear anything. All of a sudden we just see this guy at practice doing interviews, but reportedly a new defensive coordinator in Westwood, Lynn, the son of NFL coach Anthony Lynn, former Chargers head coach Anthony Lynn, and he was the safeties coach with the Baltimore Ravens, also played in the league, went to Penn State collegiately, played, I believe, for the Jets in the NFL for a number of time, and then also spent stints all around the league with the Chargers on his dad's staff. I believe he was with the Broncos. He was with like 4 or so teams before selling with the Ravens. But reportedly, Bill McGovern stepping down. Obviously, nothing but the best to Bill. Hope the health. Obviously, he's taking care of that. That's the reason for this move by him. So we wish nothing but the best for Bill McGovern. But D'Anton Lynn, your new defensive coordinator in Westwood. So now that you said you're excited, Jamal, but just overall thoughts on this move that is not officially official for UCLA, but for the sake of how UCLA does things, this is official.
Yeah, absolutely. The least media savvy institution in the media capital of the world, the UCLA Bruin football enterprise. And Ryan, I'm very excited about D'Anton Lynn for a couple of reasons. I know that the fan base over the course of the last few days, it feels like a bit of a head scratcher. There's some confusion there. Got a lot of question mark emojis from friends and fellow alums over the course of the last few days. But here's why I really like the move. And there's really 5 ingredients to why I like the move so much. The first is youth and relatability. D'Anton Lynn, 33 years old. And so he can be very relatable to the modern player in terms of age, in terms of understanding culture, in terms of knowledge of the Big Ten, in terms of what makes the modern player tick and how to best communicate that message to the modern player. The second is there's a hunger and a passion that I see from D'Anton Lynn because he's going from a very passionate organization in the Baltimore Ravens and being a defensive backs coach and a secondary coach to now the defensive coordinator, 33 years old. I remember in my earlier 30s, late 20s, when I got big promotions, Ryan. Obviously, this is very different industry, different scale. You're so fired up. You're so pumped up about a big promotion at a young age. You want to set the world on fire. You want to prove yourself. You want to do things differently. You want to make a name. You want big impact. You want big results. So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of hunger and passion that comes from D'Anton Lynn that will be greatly complemented by the passion that you're getting from a Ken Norton Jr., from a Deshaun Foster, from a Jerry Neuheisel, and you're really getting these big personalities in the room, which is ideal for a guy like Chip, who can be cerebral, who can think through things, and then let these other guys, these younger guys, be his rah-rah guys. I love that D'Anton Lynn is under the radar. And he's under the radar and not sort of a big name that we were talking about. Ryan, you and I and Will had talked about some names. Jim Leonard, Gary Patterson, talking about Jeremy Pruitt. We talked about some other names. He never came up. And so the fact that he's so under the radar, yet capable, shows this is high value. And it relates to the conversation we had earlier, Ryan, about the Rams. And how do you find those high value moves? This is a very high value move in that regard. The fourth element for me is the pedigree. The family pedigree, the coaching pedigree from his family, growing up, being the son of a coach, understanding what the ins and outs of coaching are, not just on the field, not just on the practice field, but in the media room, in between days. How do you bring that home? How do you balance it all? What do you need to think about? There is just an intimacy of knowledge when you are the son of a coach. You get an education that very few, if any, have. And then finally, I think the fifth element is that the NFL experience. He's 33 years old, but he has been exclusively in the NFL as a defensive assistant, as a secondary coach, with the Jets, with the Ravens, with others. And so this is a guy that can say, I have spent the last 7-8 years in the league. This is where you're trying to go. Let me tell you, I've been exposed to Lamar Jackson. I've been exposed to great players. I know what it takes. I see these guys day in and day out. You can do it, or you need to work on X, or you need to get better at Y to get to that next level. So he's got all five ingredients. He's a five in baseball. There's the 5-tool player. In many ways, D'Anton Lynn, even though he's not a household name, he's a 5-tool coach. And the fact that Chip was willing to go away from the Jerry Ozzaneros, from the Bill McGoverns, from the 60-year-old white men that he knows very, very well and is just sort of part of his inner circle, to break away from that and get a 33-year-old African-American from a different generation as him, speaks volumes to me about how he understands where this future is going. And it doesn't hurt that D'Anton Lynn is a Penn State graduate and understands, I think, the Big Ten landscape in a way that will be very beneficial for UCLA, given the move in 24 and beyond. So kudos to Chip Kelly. Kudos to Martin Jarman for thinking differently. And I think this is really going to set up UCLA very nicely for success, given the pieces that they have coming back defensively. And now you've got this high energy young guy who wants to prove himself. You couple that with the wise sage on offense of Chip Kelly, and there's potentially dynamite here.
Yeah, I mean, you said everything perfectly, so I don't need to, double. Or I'm going to double down on that. But yeah, very well said. I think this is a fantastic hire for all of those reasons. A few other things just to add to that is, you see a lot of these coaches, Jamal, that have the coaching pedigree, as you mentioned. His dad being Anthony Lynn, being a former running back in the NFL, and then obviously a long-standing coach throughout the league as a head coach and an assistant for many, many years. Now he's with the Niners right now as an assistant head coach. And you see a lot of sons that get opportunities because of their family lineage. And then you have to kind of look at what they do with those opportunities, and whether it's they get those opportunities and they ride them solely because of their name, or they seize that opportunity and then build upon it. And you look at guys like a Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, gets the opportunity solely because his dad's Mike Shanahan, who Super Bowl winning coach in Denver, brought Kyle onto his staff in Denver. Well, then Kyle then seizes that opportunity. He goes on and does his own thing, goes to Cleveland, goes to Washington, and goes to Atlanta. Now he's been a head coach with the Niners. You look at, we can go down the list, but here's a guy in D'Anton Lynn who similarly gets his first official defensive assistant job with the Bills, who his dad was the running backs coach for. Anthony Lynn then goes and becomes the head coach of the Chargers, brings his son with him as a defensive assistant as well. But after one season, gets hired by the Houston Texans, becomes the assistant, and then after 2 years becomes the true secondary coach, and then immediately goes to Baltimore, become the safeties coach there for 2 years. So a guy that got the opportunity because of the name lineage, but then didn't remain in his father's shadow, actually became a good coach that other teams and organizations coveted. He left his father, went and did a good job, not only got a promotion in one organization, but then got another promotion with another organization. And so those are little signs that I have to look for when you look at coaching lineage or namesake, because in life in general, if you have a parent or some family figure that has had success, you're automatically going to have more opportunity just because of, as they say, networking is everything. It's who you know, right? In any business, not just football, any business, it's all about who you know. But what do you do with that? Do you build upon it and become greater than what the opportunity was given? Or do you just kind of weasel your way and say, well, I'm like, my name will get me wherever I want to go and I'll just utilize that. So all that being said, I think Lynn's done a great job proving that he's not only a great football coach, not only a great defensive mind, not only a young up and coming star in now college, but obviously in the NFL ranks, has the respect of players, being at such a young age. When he was the secondary coach in Houston, I believe he was only 29 years old as a true secondary coach. Then he goes and becomes a safeties coach, and now he's the DC at 33. So that takes a different kind of leadership to be able to lead men, especially in the NFL. Some of those guys were older than he was. And we just had a long segment about the Rams. Sean McVay still, to this day, the youngest coach in the NFL, and he's going into year 7. The youngest coach still in the NFL when he was hired at 30. You have to have a different kind of leader. And he's another guy that has football lineage, right? Sean McVay, grandfather, John McVay. And so it takes a different kind of leadership. And D'Anton Lynn has proven that. And so that's the main reason I love the hire. And then to add on to everything else you said too, I think the fact that the swagger and relatability that he can bring to the defense that really hasn't been here in the Chip Kelly era. We've seen it actually on offense, right? Like Chip, we know Chip's an old soul. He's a not necessarily a player's coach in the sense that he's not a rah-rah guy. He's, very, business forward. He's going to he's a playbook guy. He's a kind of behind the scenes nerdy football coach, but he has guys like Jerry Neuheisel, has guys like Deshaun Foster, who are guys that have played in the league. They've been around football. They're rah-rah guys. They can bring the swagger on the sideline. They really didn't have that on defense. You had Ken Norton Jr., who is historic and beloved, but even he's older in age. He's not necessarily this big swagger guy. Well, now they have that potentially with D'Anton Lynn. And I think that is a huge thing with college kids nowadays. I think Chip's recognized that college football is very, very different than it was when a decade ago, or maybe longer than that now, since he was at NFL stint when he was in Oregon. And obviously we know how different it is with the transfer portal and all this, but just the age and the culture of 18 to 21-year-olds are very different now than they were when he was in Oregon, Jamal, it was basically when we were in college. And we know kids nowadays are very different than what we were when we were 18 and 21. It's a very different style. And you have to have coaches that can not only coach and teach, but lead that style. And so I think Lynn brings that in. And I'm ecstatic with it. I think it goes the first, and I'm getting long with it now, so I'll turn it back to you. But the first sign we saw of a move like this happening was, remember, whatever it was, a month ago when they hired Cody Whitfield, Sac State, secondaries coach, and everyone's like, who's that? And it's like this young, kind of up and coming mind, has a smart lineage, had some ties to Stanford, and they bring him in, and that kind of showed the shift of Chip realizing, like, all right, we got to change things. I've been doing things the same way for 20 years. It's time that I get on board with, like, times are changing and I need to change things too. And I think he finally did that. And I think I'm ecstatic by the move. I think this is a great defensive move, and maybe we'll finally see Jamal, this UCLA defense, in the top 50.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a high bar to get to, but
No.
what I really love, Ryan, here is I think the youth movement. And you look at this nucleus. You look at this nucleus of DeAnton Lynn, Deshaun Foster, and Jerry Neuheisel. And you put that together with some experience with Ken Norton Jr., and then you package it around with Chip Kelly. And then at an even macro level, you have a young, energetic AD that's all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, social justice. And now you're just, I mean, who wouldn't want to come play for UCLA when you look at that management system? And so, look, USC is USC. But when you look at Mike Bohn, Lincoln Riley, and Alex Grinch, it's white man, white man, white man, right? And so now you've got a diversity at UCLA that I think is going to be very attractive to this younger generation. You talked about how the younger generation kind of thinks differently than we did. And I think equity, I think inclusion, diversity, opportunity, experiences, these are all the things that are top of mind with this generation. And UCLA's coaching staff has now set themselves up for success. And I think there's two themes here, Ryan, too. One is pedigree. Keep that in mind. DeAnton Lynn, son of a coach. Jerry Neuheisel, son of a coach. Ken Norton Jr., through the Pete Carroll coaching lineage. And then you couple that pedigree with guys that have either directly played in the league or are just youthful. And so when you talk, DeAnton Lynn played in the league. Neuheisel was a UCLA quarterback and a great college teammate and player. Deshaun Foster played in the league, all-time great UCLA player. Ken Norton Jr., still the only guy with 3 Super Bowl rings. So now you've got guys who have been there, and you've got guys with that pedigree, and they can relate. UCLA is really setting themselves up very nicely for the future. I think they have the right folks at the helm, from the AD to Chip to the rest of the coaching staff. And even you want to translate it over into basketball, Ryan, with Mick Cronin. I mean, I just think UCLA is getting it in terms of their hires. And let's see this thing translate on the field. You've got Dante Moore. You've got a bunch of guys coming back on defense. I think it's going to be very, very exciting.
Well, and Jamal, so you look at Lynn, and this will be the big question that I'm sure everyone will talk about, is obviously he's never had to recruit. I mean, he's been in the NFL his entire coaching career. And so that will be the big litmus test for him. But B, the big thing people kind of hang over like this hire is like, well, you bring in a guy that's never done this before. 2 points to that. One, that's why I have Ken Norton Jr. Like, he's the true recruiting prowess on the defensive side. Obviously, Chip Kelly does the recruiting as the head coach. But 2, and nowadays, I mean, there's still obviously an art to recruiting, right? Like, there's still you have to sit in living rooms, you have to convince parents, you have to, do certain things. However, I do think that recruiting has shifted a lot more because of social media, because of how you can connect with athletes and kids without actually being in their living room and having, apple pie with mom and dad and doing all this. There's a different formula to it. And if I'm a kid in SoCal and I want to stay in LA, I'm like, okay, I have 2 great head coaches in Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly. And offensively, you could probably call it a wash. If you're a quarterback, I think obviously Lincoln Riley is, in my opinion, a better developer of the quarterback. But I think just purely if you're an offensive player, both are a good situation. If I'm a defensive player, and this, I'm not trying to disrespect Alex Grinch, but just based on their defenses, but also just based on his past, and I see a guy, that played in the league, his dad coaches in the league, all his network is from the league, and Ken Norton played, like, you look at that and you're like, I'm playing defense at UCLA. Why would I go to USC with a coach that has 0 ties to the NFL, never played in the league? And you have these guys that are younger, hipper. They've been in the league. They know all these coaching connections, whatnot. So I think that is where the recruiting, if people are questioning it, your resume sometimes is all you need. Look where I've been. You want to get to the league? Remember the great coach Calipari at Kentucky? He's not shy about it. He says, I recruit kids saying, like, you want to go to the NBA? Come here. Yeah, I want to win a national championship. Yeah, I do that. But if you want to go to the NBA, I'm your guy. I will get you the NBA in 1 year. Come here. If I'm UCLA, if you want to play defense and get to the league, this is where you're coming. Don't go across town because they don't know what they're doing on defense. If you want to give up 40 points a game and everyone criticize you, go there. If you want to come here and get to the league, we'll see you here. So I think it's a genius move.
Oh, for sure, Ryan. I think you nailed it on the head there. And I think that's really where they're trying to find the competitive advantage. And I you couldn't have said it better. And I know you don't want to disrespect Alex Grinch. I think most of the Trojan family would say, please, by all means. Alex Grinch is a bum. Okay. So, when you give up 46 points to Tulane, he's a bum. And he's going to be a bum until he proves otherwise. And so I think that UCLA can really use that as an advantage and as leverage moving forward, and to make up for whatever small delta exists between Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly, particularly at the quarterback position. So this rivalry, I think, just gets a little bit more dynamite. It gets more competitive as we shift from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten.
Yes. And the last thing I'll say, because we're out of time, is when you look at USC and you look at Lincoln Riley and you look at history of LA, the easy comparison was always with the Rams, right? Young offensive coach, the swagger that Lincoln Riley brings, Caleb Williams obviously always being there, but just looking at the pedigree and the coaching. But the way that UCLA has been operating the last 18 months or so, with coaching hires, with the transfer portal, with recruiting, with what they're doing in Westwood, with the practice facility, UCLA and it was always UCLA Chargers. And now it's like UCLA is looking more like Les Snead and the Rams in the way they're operating, because they're a little bit more forward thinking in that regard. Whereas USC brought their coaching staff in, they're staying the same. They're kind of keeping their eyes on the prize and keeping within the lines and not drawing outside of them. Now we'll see if that changes after next year. But so far it's been very keep your eyes here and let's stay on the path and move forward. And obviously it worked out for them, so I'm not talking bad about that. But UCLA is kind of looking a little bit more like the Rams these last few months.
No, Ryan, I think you said it really well. I think it's outcomes-wise, USC is like the Rams, right? In terms of Rams won the Super Bowl, USC won the Heisman, in contention, top 5. So when you look at outcomes and you say, what has Sean McVay gotten out of his talent? What has Lincoln Riley gotten out of his talent? And what are the wins and losses on the board? They're very similar. But when you look at process, and when you look at the way of thinking, and when you look at making moves, I think in that regard, UCLA is very much like the Rams, to your point, of finding competitive advantages, finding niches, finding ways to do things differently. I think the benefit that USC had is they were just able to gather enough money to go get Lincoln Riley. Was it very strategic? No, not really. They just outbid him. And more power to USC for being able to do that. That's what makes USC and very special. But outcomes-wise, yes. Process-wise, it's more UCLA with the Rams. So very interesting to see how this plays out, the outcome team versus the process team. And let's see now if little brother in terms of football can finally kind of get there. I've said it now for a number of years, Ryan. This is a critical moment in USC football history in 2023 with Caleb Williams coming back for another year, because 2024 onwards, when you look at coaching staff, when you look at quarterback between Dante Moore and Malachi Nelson, when you look at the rest of the roster, when you look at facilities, when you look at TV money, when you look at overall endowment, when you look at guys in the league, I have never seen the gap between USC football and UCLA football be narrower. I have grown up, born and raised in LA. I know these two schools better than just about anybody. I went to both of these schools. I have never seen the gap as narrow as I do now, which is why this year is so critical for USC to be able to extend that gap the way it was. go in a CFP, go make some noise, and really let Caleb loose. Because short of that, everyone forgets, Ryan, it's been 17 years, going on 18 years since that great Rose Bowl game between Texas and USC. So even though UCLA has not had success in football for the last 20, 25 years, when you look across town, it's a head scratcher when you're like, well, USC's only won the Pac-12 once since 2008. So neither team really has a lot of momentum right now going into the Big Ten. Can USC change that and get that advantage, or is it a wash? And if it's a wash going into Big Ten play, it's game on, because then a lot of other elements come into play. Quality of school matters, campus matters then, with a lot of Midwestern values and Midwestern homes. And the scale starts really tipping in UCLA's direction.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, fun to watch. We'll have it all for you. So let us know your thoughts on Coach Lynn becoming the new DC in Westwood. We are on break for radio. If you're on podcast, this is the end of your UCLA Bruins segment. Thank you all so much for tuning in. But let us know your thoughts. You can text UCLA to 31032 or hit us up on Twitter at LAFBJams or at Ryan Dyrud LAFB. Radio guys, back at the break. Podcast. Talk to y'all next week.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.